I see it.
All right, we are live. Hi, this is Stephen Lake, and this is Therapist Assist Group, or TAG, and you are taggers, all of you. And glad to have you here. I am here with a wonderful woman who I met in the past year or so by the name of Candace Plattor. And she is a specialist on addictions, and in particular, she works with families of addicts. And I'm going to be talking to her this evening, and we'll have a question and answer after we sort of do our little chat. And hope to have some fun here. So, first of all, welcome, Candace.
Thanks, Lake.
You're welcome, Platter. So, Candace is an author as well as a therapist. She's the author of Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, the top 10 survival tips for loving someone with an addiction.
Do you have a copy of it there, Stephen? Because I forgot to bring mine over here. Yeah.
Well, I've got this little thing here. Look at that nice.
Okay.
People can even just read it right off the top there. But I'll read it to them.
Okay.
Candace also knows from personal experience what it means to be an addict. Within a year of being diagnosed with Crohn's disease in '73, she found herself in the throes of prescription drug addiction as a result of Valium, Demerol, and codeine prescribed to her for many years. She also used marijuana on a daily basis to control her physical and emotional pain, becoming addicted to that as well. After nearly 15 years of abusing substances, she reached the bottom in 1987. Thus began her journey of recovery and self-discovery. Candace graduated from Adler with a master's degree in counseling. Yay, Adler! And in 2001, and for over 25 years in her private practice, she's been helping clients and their loved ones understand their addictive behaviors and make healthier life choices. She's also an author. I'll point this up again. You see there's 2 books there.
There's Stephen, can I just go and get the copy of mine? I know we're live, but I'll just be a second.
Well,
is that okay?
I
or do you have yours?
I might have a copy, maybe, right, if I'm lucky. Hold on, give me a second. What do we? I got all sorts of books here. Do I have yours?
How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb?
Exactly. Oh my God, look at all these books here. Oh, there's Allison's book from last week. And no, I can't see yours right now.
Okay, I'm just going to go get it. So apologies, everyone. I should have thought of this before. Just a minute.
All right. And I'll show you from last week's interview with Alison Jones, A New Philosophy or Exceptional Living, More. That's Allison's book. And we're going to have Candace's book. Go ahead, Candace. Let's see your book.
Okay. Right now, yeah.
Okay, just hold it still. Hold on a second. I'm just going to bring it over to you. There we go. Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. Can you just pull it back a little bit? There we go. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, all right. So that's with the introduction. But maybe I'll ask you a question. So how did you get into therapy?
You mean working as a therapist or into therapy?
Good question. Let's make the distinction.
I mean,
as a therapist, how did you become a therapist?
Okay, I want to say hello to everyone. Pardon our technological stuff in the beginning here. Yeah, I was a client for a long time, and I actually think that therapists need to be clients as well, at least at some point in their lives. They need to be, because we need to understand what the client feels like on the other side of the desk or the other chair. So I am an addict in recovery. As Stephen was saying, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in the 70s, so I was in my 20s, and I was prescribed many addictive drugs to deal with this condition. And I got very sick from that emotionally, very, very low. And so about 15 years after that, after first being diagnosed, I made a decision that I was not going to continue using drugs and reached out for some help. And that's when I became a client in therapy. And then at that time, though, I was actually working as a counselor. I was working at a place called Maples, which is an adolescent treatment center for kids who are really having a hard time. And that's where I kind of had my breakdown, if you will, and started to realize that I didn't like this life. But so I had been working as a counselor before that, but about 3 years into my recovery, I now have 29 years clean and sober.
Yay!
Congratulations. Thank you. About 3 years in, I decided that I wanted to work in the addiction field. I had gotten so much help for myself, and I really wanted to be able to give back. So I went looking for a job and found one in the downtown east side at a wonderful place called Watari. Some of you may know of it. And stayed there for about 16 years, working with drug addicts, alcoholics, people with different kinds of addictions, eating disorders, a whole lot of things. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, decided that it was time to leave there, and I wanted to have my own full-time private practice. I already had a part-time practice, and opened my practice. I had graduated with my master's by then, and so I've actually been in the field working with addictions for about 25 years, 26 years now.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to segue that right into some of the questions I have here for you. So how can someone who's not an addict, how would they know if somebody, other than the obvious signs, that someone is an addict who's part of their family? How can they tell?
Well, when somebody's developed an addiction, they have different behaviors that they're exhibiting, and there's a huge range of them. But there are things like, their sleeping patterns aren't the same. They're staying out all night. They're coming home with, a lot of lability, meaning they're having high and low mood swings, up and down all the time. They look different. Some of them lose a lot of weight. Right. They're always looking for money. Things like that. Okay. And so they often change their circle of friends. If they haven't been in a circle where they've been using with those people, they change their circle of friends. So that's another thing to look for.
Right. Now, in the old days, when we talked about addictions, we often talked about there was just like two. There was either drugs or alcohol. But nowadays, that's really an expanded area. What are some of the other things that fall under the field of addictions?
Yeah. And I work with addiction of all kinds, because to me, addiction is addiction, and I basically work with it in the same way. But we've got things like eating disorders and smoking and gambling and internet addiction, pornography, that kind of thing, gaming, just, chocolate. What I like to say to people is I could do worse, and I have. But, anything that is being used in a way that just isn't healthy, and most people who have a tendency toward addiction believe that if one is good, more is better. So with that kind of mentality, we have to be careful.
Yeah, I noticed that in my practice. If I have someone with an addiction, often they have multiple addictions. It could be, say, drugs, could be alcohol, then they smoke, and then, there might be a sexual addiction as well. It's just a multiplicity of addictions.
Yeah, but also just across the board, if one is good, more is better. So, for example, chocolate, You know, if I have like one piece of chocolate, I want 100 pieces of chocolate, and that would be way better.
Ah, okay, I see what you're getting at.
Right?
All right.
So it's a case of being really careful.
Yeah. And what makes people create a lifestyle and move into addictive behaviors? What's driving people to do that?
Addiction begins with people who are not feeling good about their lives and usually not feeling good about themselves. And what they're doing is they're reaching for something, anything that's going to make them feel better. Another addictive behavior that I didn't mention is codependency, which is where in relationships you put other people's needs ahead of your own on a pretty consistent basis. And you know, relationship addiction. I mean, we talk about sex addiction, there's relationship addiction too. So if I don't feel good about myself, I'm going to look for love in all the wrong places, right? So it's an interesting thing because addiction is really a form of self-care, but it's a really twisted form of self-care that always comes around and bites you on the butt.
So it's kind of a dysfunctional approach to self-care.
Yeah, but that's right. But it usually starts out, people start out to feel better.
Right.
And most people don't think they're going to become addicts. This is the thing. They think, well, you might become an addict. It's going to get you, but it won't get me. I'm different. I'm special. I can handle it.
Right. I can handle it. Yeah.
I can handle it.
Now, before we go into some of the other questions I have here, what was the prevailing paradigm of how addiction healthcare workers had when dealing with addicts, and is yours different? What's the current approach and what's your approach? Beliefs?
Well, the basic approach, and it has been like this for a long time, is the medical model, and it's what 12-step programs use, and this is where you see addiction as a disease. And definitely there is brain involvement in addiction, and sometimes there's organ involvement. You know, if somebody's been smoking pot for a long time, as I was, it can affect the lungs. It's very toxic smoke, you know. And if somebody's been drinking for a long time, it can cause trouble with the liver or the kidneys. And so sometimes people like to see it as a disease, and I don't see addiction as a disease. I have a disease. I have Crohn's disease, and I can't say to myself, gee, I think I just won't have Crohn's anymore. You know, I think I'll just stop having Crohn's. I can't do that, try as I might. It just doesn't work that way with diabetes or cancer or those kinds of illnesses. So I don't see addiction as a disease, and I think sometimes it's kind of a victim mentality, and I'm not sure it's a healthy thing to tell an addict that they have a disease, because two things can happen if you tell an addict that they have a disease. One is, well, you know, I have a disease, I can't help it. Don't tell me to stop, I can't help it. And the other is, I have a disease, I can't help it, and you become a victim of your disease. And either way, it's not healthy. I see addiction much differently than that. I see addiction more as a choice than I do as an illness. I'm not in any way saying that people choose to become addicts of any kind. I don't think anybody does. I certainly didn't choose to become an addict. I don't think anybody says, gee, that'll be fun, let's be an addict, you know, in this lifetime. But there comes a time when people are under the influence of addiction in whatever way they are, when they know that it's a problem with their lives. Whether it's pornography, whether it's gaming, whether it's an eating disorder, whether it's drugs and alcohol, we know that there is a problem. Even if nobody tells us, we know that. And that's when we are at choice to either stay in active addiction or get some help to come out of active addiction. And And for me, it's a choice. So I work with people around, what's the choice you're making? Why are you making this choice? How can we look at making a healthier choice for you? Learning how to deal with life.
Okay. So the addict, there's a person, somehow they've picked up this addiction because they felt it was a way of making themselves feel better.
Right.
And now they're into their active addiction, and now probably family members are starting to become aware of that. So the second question I have is, so what happens at that point then? How does that start to affect the family or family members, either immediate or extended?
In a lot of ways. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, there is not a lot of help out there for families, for loved
Mm-hmm.
ones, which is a big reason I do the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
They, the one thing that happens to many, many loved ones is that they don't talk about what's happening in their families.
Mm-hmm.
They often feel like they're responsible for the addiction. They somehow caused it, and
Okay.
it's somehow their responsibility to find a way to end it. So they don't talk about it. They just feel these awful feelings of shame and guilt and frustration and confusion and anger and resentment and
Mm-hmm.
all this jumble of stuff. And underneath all of it, I think they're terrified, especially if drugs and alcohol are involved, or if it's an eating disorder. They're terrified that the person they love, the addict they love, is going to die. And because they're not talking about it, they don't know that there are so many other people, so many other families going through the same thing, and they often don't reach out for help.
Okay. All right. So is there an aspect of denial as well?
Total denial. Did I not say denial? Yeah. But there comes a time when they just can't be in denial anymore, and they know this is an issue, and they addicts and their loved ones know there's an issue long before they talk about the fact that there's an issue.
Okay.
So they're not in denial for as long as they really seem to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked before about codependency. Is there some sort of relationship that the addict has with the family members that can keep it locked in?
There definitely is, and the term for it is enabling.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a firm believer that we can actually stop addiction. And addiction has become so rampant, partly, I think, because loved ones don't know the right things to do. They don't know how to be with their loved ones in a way that will help instead of hinder. So a classic example of enabling is when you have a drug addict or an alcoholic who doesn't have any money, and they ask you for money, and you give them money. Right. Or you pay their rent, or you let them live at home and punch holes in the walls when they get angry and threaten you and call you an effing whatever.
Right.
And so, you allow that.
Right. So let me play the devil's advocate here. So say I'm a mother or a father, and this is my 19-year-old son, and I can't just kick him out. I love him. He'll become, who knows, he could die on the street if I kick him out of the house. How do you respond to that?
I hear that all the time. I hear that from basically every parent who comes in, and I hear it from siblings. I hear it from partners. Can't kick him out. Well, if you're not going to have consequences for this behavior, why should the addict do anything different? So there's a couple of sayings about this. One is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten.
Right.
And the other one that I like even better, it's simpler, I like simple, is if nothing changes, nothing changes. So you've got an addict doing these behaviors, there's something really wrong, you're very afraid that they're going to wind up dead. The thing that a lot of loved ones, especially parents, don't understand is that if you don't set consequences, if you don't raise the bar in the relationship and have different expectations, a lot of addicts wind up dead anyway, by their own hand. They overdose. They, you know, it's not just because you kick somebody out that they die, right? And people sometimes like to accuse me of tough love.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very much a tough love advocate, because tough love is love. The most loving thing that somebody can do for an addict is to not support them in active addiction. The most loving thing you can do for an addict is support them in active recovery of some sort. But to support somebody to stay in addiction, to keep giving somebody money that you know is going to be spent on drugs, how is that loving? How is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
And so often what's happening with the loved ones is that this is hard for people to wrap their heads around, I know. They're meeting their own needs by doing this, because they're saying exactly what you said. I can't kick them out on the street. That's their need. Maybe this son or daughter needs to be on the street for a couple of nights to understand that this is not the life they want, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to encourage or support active addiction, ever. It's just not a good thing to do.
So when we enable our sons or our daughters, it's kind of like we're behavioral conditioning. We're rewarding them for their improper behavior, if you will.
Yeah, we're condoning bad behavior. That's right. And that just isn't a loving thing to do for anybody, because it's preparing them for a world that doesn't exist out there, really,
mm-hmm.
unless it's the drug world or something.
Right.
But consequences are necessary things. Cause and effect is part of what we deal with in life, and it's important for people to learn that. Otherwise, they don't change what they're doing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think you and I were talking recently, and I was giving the example of I used to work in the prison system, and
yeah,
the majority of prisoners actually are in there once, and they realize this sucks. They don't ever want to come back again, and they don't. You know,
That's
on
right.
TV and that, we hear the ones that keep coming back. You know, and they keep coming back, keep coming back. But most people don't. They go, I never want to be in prison again. And believe me, you don't. It's not a nice place to be. And
if you've got a family system that's dysfunctional, because addiction is a family condition. Everybody in the family is suffering. Everybody in the family needs to heal. If you've got a prisoner, or you've got an addict that isn't a prisoner, but you've got a prisoner with a dysfunctional family, they're not healing, the prisoner leaves prison, gets back into that dysfunctional system, and guess what happens? They get into trouble again.
Exactly.
Right? Back they go. So it's a whole, if we can get families and other loved ones, friends, anybody involved, if we can get people some help around how to really deal with this effectively, we can stop addiction. It's crazy that it's gone on for as long as it has.
So you really see then it really has to be a family systems approach or a social approach to working with an addict, not just a one-off.
Yeah, because often the addict is the identified, we call in therapy and psychology, right? We call it the identified patient or the identified problem.
Right.
And I look at the identified problem, who's usually the addict, and I'm thinking, okay, good, in a way, good. This person is really showing the family, really getting the family's attention, and really showing the family there is something really screwed up here. To me, that person is the canary in the coal mine. And so that person needs to heal, but the other people around that person who've been enabling them, who've been, not doing things that really help, they need to change what they're doing too, or it'll just continue.
Right. And so that's part of your work, is working with the family then to sort of get them to be healthier themselves and also be able to be better, for lack of a better word, better parents or better friends or whatever the relationship is.
Healthier, yeah.
A healthier,
Yeah.
more functioning relationship.
And actually, you know, you said it was a part of my work. It's the biggest part of my work, and it's what my passion is, because without that, addiction thrives.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I lost you for a second.
I said without helping the families, without the healing in the family, addiction thrives. It continues to thrive.
Right. Okay.
We don't want that.
Right. So it's the same when, again, going back to the prison system, when they left, often they were going back into the communities that supported their illegal behaviors. So they would come right back, you know.
That's
and sometimes, and when we were dealing with actual addictions, and we have, you know, addictions programs in the prison system, we'd often say, well, you know, you may need to get, you know, new friends or something like that, because all your friends are addicts themselves or alcoholics themselves. And they would look at us with horror on their faces, because they go, well, that's everybody I know.
Yeah.
And often that may even be family members, especially when we're dealing with First Nations people where the whole community had addictions.
When we're dealing with poverty, often this is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other issue. Don't even get me started on poverty. But yeah, you know, in 12-step programs, which I'm neither advocating or not advocating, that's up to the person. But they have a lot of good slogans. They have a lot of wonderful sayings that I love. One of them is that you need to find new playmates and new playgrounds.
Right.
And yeah, that could be very difficult. Sometimes it takes actually getting oneself out of that neighborhood, out of that place, and going someplace else. Yeah.
Yeah, very difficult life choices, both for the addict and for the loved ones of addicts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So question 4 I've got here is, can you ever really live a good life with an addict in it?
Yes. Yes, you can.
How do we do that?
Absolutely. Well, there's a few first things. The first thing is this, and the first thing is this. First of all, loved ones need to understand and be helped to understand that they did not cause this addiction. It doesn't even matter what they've done. They haven't caused it, because the addict is making his own choice, his or her own choice, to use or to steal or to do whatever the addictive behavior is. It's not cause. The loved one doesn't have to feel shame and guilt about that. And it's also so prevalent that, you know, for anybody to be ashamed of this anymore, it is so not necessary. So this is I think the first thing is that loved ones need to understand about addiction. They need to understand that they have contributed to the addiction continuing if they've been enabling the addict, which most of them have been. So once they can stop enabling and set healthy boundaries, and to be able to say to an addict, I will not, you know, this is the message. I love you so much. We love you so much. It's just tearing us up to watch this happen to you. We love you so much. And we love you so much that we are no longer willing to support you in active addiction, because we understand now that that isn't healthy for you. We didn't know that before, and we know we were enabling you. Now we get it. And because we love you so much, it's like you can't even say that enough. Right. Because we love you, we're going to stop enabling you, and we're going to do things differently. And if you need to stay in active addiction, then we're not probably going to have a whole lot to do with you. But when you're ready to be in active recovery, let us know, because we will be there for you then. Okay. All right. So what are so people start to be able to sleep at night. You know, people start to be able to concentrate at work. They start to be able to give attention to their other children. They start to be able to take care of themselves, to practice good self-care. Because they're saying to the addict, make your choice. If you're not going to be in recovery, we love you, but we can't have you in our lives right now.
So it sounds like you're giving responsibility back to the addict.
Bingo. Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't love them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you never see them. Maybe you take them for lunch every Thursday,
mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
but with an expectation that they're not high when they meet you for lunch.
Right.
If they're high, you're going to leave. But if they want a meal, they don't use that morning. And you start showing an addict that you believe in their resiliency, that they have a choice and they can make that choice.
Mm-hmm. I'm always stunned with my own clients that have stopped difficult addictions like meth addicts and stuff like that. And they've stopped literally overnight. They just stop. And I'd always go, how do you do that? And
yeah,
they all say the same thing. They all say the same thing. I just decided to stop.
Yeah.
And it blows me away when they say that.
Yeah. And some people can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I made a decision
Mm-hmm.
to stop, but it took me a lot longer. It wasn't just
Mm-hmm.
like that, and I needed a lot of help because I had
Mm-hmm.
some physical illness at the same time. So I was depressed, I was suicidal,
Mm-hmm.
So I needed some help. But there are people who just make the decision. That's it. If addiction was not a choice, I wouldn't be clean and sober. If addiction wasn't a choice, we wouldn't have thousands, maybe millions of recovering addicts all over the world. It's a choice.
Right.
There's no question about that.
And what I'm also hearing you say is that for some people, they need a lot of support after they've made that choice to make it become successful.
Yes, and so do their loved ones.
Right.
Because all the dynamics change. All of the dynamics change in the family, all of the expectations of the parents or the spouse, or, sometimes what happens, for example, is you have a couple, right? Mm-hmm. And one of them is an addict or an alcoholic, and they start going to AA or NA or some kind of group like that they go to fairly frequently.
Yeah.
And the spouse, who's clean and sober, still doesn't have the addict in his or her life because they're out at meetings. There's just a whole change of dynamics, and everybody needs to be educated and helped to understand what to do.
Right, right. You reminded me of one story where I had a couple, and the man stopped his addiction, and the woman came back to me a number of weeks later. She said, I liked him better when he was drunk.
I've heard that. Yeah, he was a happy drunk.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least I knew what to expect when he was drinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is, that's not a good story. It's a common story. It's not a healthy story. And this is why the loved ones need to have help in changing as well. And the unfortunate thing, there's so much help out there for addicts of all kinds. Mm-hmm. I'm really happy about that. But there's still so little out there for the loved ones. There's Al-Anon, which is great, but the 12 steps don't work for everybody, and we know that.
Right.
There are treatment centers for the addicts who have like expanded weekends. One weekend, the addict is in treatment for 30 days, and one weekend of that time, the loved ones come and they learn about enabling and they learn about codependency, and but nobody's really saying, okay, how is that manifesting in your life, and what do you want to do about that, and why do you think you've been enabling, and let's go down and see what's really happening. That doesn't happen.
Okay, all right. Now, one of the questions I have here is, why do people always talk about an addict having to reach bottom before they get help? What is that question all about? Well,
everybody's bottom is different. Mm-hmm. It's like you were saying about the people who just decide.
Right.
Maybe they've reached a very low bottom where they were very unhealthy. They couldn't work. They lost everything. Their family wouldn't talk to them. That's a pretty low bottom. And maybe that's what made them decide to stop. Or maybe they had a higher bottom where they still had a job, they still had a car, they still had a place to live, their family was still in touch with them, and they thought, I really don't want to lose all that. Like, I'm starting to hear about addiction and understand, and I really don't want to lose. So they make that choice. There comes a point, and that's what the bottom is, that point where people say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Okay.
And so my bottom was pretty low. I couldn't work. I was very sick physically. Like I said, I was depressed and suicidal. That's pretty low.
Right.
But I was like that for a while before I reached out for help.
Right.
So.
Right. So what I'm hearing, that great therapist expression, what I'm hearing you say is that everyone's unique and everybody will find their own personal decision point.
Yes.
Where they finally choose to reach out.
Yes, and we can help addicts get there sooner.
Okay. Tell me about that.
That's what loved ones need to learn how to do. And I help loved ones understand that they need to make it as uncomfortable as possible for the addict they love to stay in active addiction.
Okay.
We need to make this uncomfortable for them.
All right. So what are some of the things they might do to make them uncomfortable?
Okay. Well, you've got an addict who's living at home, who isn't working, isn't contributing to the household, has a bed to sleep in and a cushy shower and all of that stuff. And you say to the person, if you're going to keep using, you can't live here. Okay. And they get to a place, they go from, well, I can't kick him out, he'll die out there, because the loved ones get to the end of their rope. They do. Yeah. And when they get to that place, and hopefully they can get there sooner than later, then they can say to the addict, we love you. We don't want you here in this condition. We can't have you here in this condition. And we're not going to make this comfortable for you anymore. I'm a great proponent of naming things. Right. So I name the elephants. So yeah, we're not going to make this comfortable for you anymore. Right. This is not good for you, so we're not going to do this.
Right.
And it's because we love you. It's not a punishment. It's because we love you.
Okay. Now, in your book, Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, you have top 10 survival tips. What would you consider the 3 most important tips that people need to know when they are facing the problem initially?
Okay. Well, I really think that all of the tips are important, but I do have 3 favorites.
What are they?
Well, the first one, I'm just getting my book here. The first one is, if there's anybody out there that has a book, it's tip number 3, survival tip number 3, that says you cannot, where'd you go?
Oh, I'm still here. I'm not on camera. I'm still looking for that book.
Oh, okay. It says you cannot control or fix another person, so stop trying. So this has to do with our powerlessness over other people. We cannot control another person. We like to think we can. We're taught that we can. We can't. The only time we can control somebody else is when they allow us to control them, which means that we're not really controlling them anyway. Right. And I have quotes in my book from other people for each tip, and this one is my favorite. And so this one's from Robert Heinlein, who wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, science fiction writer. I love that book, and I always felt like a stranger in a strange land. So this is, never try to teach a pig to sing. It's a waste of your time, and it annoys the pig.
I like that one too.
So never try to make an addict stop. This is what loved ones do. They try to convince them, please stop, you're killing me. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Right. They have to get to where they have to get to, and it has to be uncomfortable for the addict. Yeah. So learning that we can't control somebody else is the first most important tip. The next one is tip number 5. And tip number 5 is learn the difference between helping and enabling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So an enabling behavior, as we've been talking about, is one that keeps the addiction going, like giving money or letting them live at home, or,
Right.
you know, letting them be obnoxious and condoning bad behavior. That's enabling. A helping behavior is to say to them, you're not going to be able to do this here in our home anymore. It's not okay.
Okay.
And these are the consequences, and, you know, make a choice.
Right.
And it's, I know, you know, when I'm talking about it here, it's really cut and dried. It probably sounds that way. I work with people for a while to get them to a place of being able to do this.
Right.
So it's not like I have an expectation of loved ones that, bang, they're just going to get it. You know, it takes a while. In fact,
that must be a very painful process for them to get to that decision point.
Yeah, and I actually have a year-long program where I work with the loved one. I work with the whole family. So I will work with the addict when the addict is ready for me. Usually addicts are very angry with me at the beginning when families start to work with me, because things change and they don't like me very much. I like them. I like them a lot, but they don't like me. And that's okay with me. But, you know, it's taken a while for these dysfunctional dynamics to take root and become real problems. Right. The good news is that it doesn't take as long for it to get fixed, for it to get resolved.
Well, that is good news. So that's one of the questions I have is, so these interventions, do they really work?
No, not usually. Interventions, you're talking about like an actual intervention?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the work that you do. I'm classifying that as, you know, the work you do.
The interventions that I teach the loved ones to do with the addicts in their lives absolutely works. But sometimes it takes a little while. And it usually takes a while before an enabler will become a helper.
Okay. All right.
Because they're so used to coddling the addict, which is not helping at all. Yeah. I mean, the addiction just continues and gets worse. The other thing to understand about addiction is that it's a progressive condition. So it doesn't just get better, it gets worse and worse. And the reason for that, especially if there's a mind-altering substance like alcohol or drugs, is that the brain needs more and more of that substance to get the same effect. And I think it's the same if it's an adrenaline rush of any kind, you know. You need more and more. You need to do something more dangerous, you know. And so it just becomes much more, it becomes progressive. So it's not going to stop on its own. Right. Yeah.
And what was the last favorite point?
The last one is number 8. And number 8 is know that self-care does not equal selfish. And this is a really important one, because people who are loved ones are often really codependent. So the definition for codependency, of course, is when we put other people's needs ahead of our own. So if I really feel like I have to put your needs ahead of mine, Stephen, I'm going to feel like if I take any time for me, I'm going to feel like I'm just so selfish. And somewhere they learned that. They learned that it's an addictive behavior. They learned it growing up. They got attention for being selfless. This is often a women's thing, although there are men who are codependent as well. Right. So, you know, the question that you asked about, can you live a good life if you have an addict in it? If you're taking care of yourself, if you look after yourself, you can have a really good life. You're still going to be concerned about the addict, of course, but you can live a good life even so.
Okay. All right.
And, you know, role modeling that for an addict is a really good thing to do. And sometimes when we start taking care of ourselves, the addict sits up and takes notice and says, oh, maybe I want some of that. You know, I maybe want that kind of life. Yeah.
Okay. I was just looking over the questions here, and this sort of segues. We've already mentioned in part, especially that last one, this idea, the importance of self-care for those who are in relationships with addicts.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that people need or could do to take better care of themselves?
Well, when I work with self-care, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very holistic process. So, we're looking at physical and mental and emotional and spiritual, those four pillars. Um, so we need to look at, how are you treating yourself physically? We are what we eat. We might not want to believe that, but we are. How are we treating our bodies? How are we adorning our bodies? Are we taking care of our hygiene? Things like that. We could combine physical and emotional with, are we getting a mani-pedi with our best friend? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So connection.
Right.
So the physical self-care is really important. We are in bodies, and we need to take care of our bodies. We need to take care of ourselves emotionally. There's a great acronym, again, in 12-step programs called HALT.
Mm-hmm.
It's HALT.
Yes.
So it stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Mm.
Am I hungry? If you're not feeling right, you're not feeling yourself, am I hungry? Do I need something to eat? Do I need a snack? Am I angry? Do I need to talk about something? Am I lonely? Do I need to call someone and connect? Am I tired? Do I need a nap? There's a nap for that. I love naps. They're one of my favorite things. So that's the emotional part. The mental is keep yourself sharp, especially if you're getting, dare I say, older. We have to keep and everybody will hopefully get older. We have to keep ourselves sharp. So take classes, do puzzles, sit on the floor and play with your grandchildren, and the spiritual, find out what that is for you. It may be a church or a temple or a mosque, but it may not be. It may be something else, and find out what that is for you and do more of it.
Right, right. I see with some of the families that I've worked with, their whole lives tend to revolve around the addict, and they lose all those things that you were talking about, all those social connections, and their lives become much more narrow and restricted.
Yes, and especially if there's shame involved in that. If I feel like I've caused your addiction, I'm not going to tell anybody about that. And I'm going to stop hanging out with the people that, I think are going to judge me for causing your addiction. In AA, there's this joke that isn't funny, but there's a joke that says, you'd drink too if you had a wife like mine. Well, we know that's crap. He's drinking because he wants to drink. It's not because of his wife, right? His wife may be contributing to some things, but he's making his decision to drink. So,
well, that's
when
the
people,
same choice with that's the same choice with violence.
It's exactly the same choice with violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Violence is a choice. There are other ways to handle emotions. There are other ways to handle reality besides, violence is an addictive behavior too. I'm going to feel better if I beat you up.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't really talked about that, but do you see a lot of physical outbursts and violence working with the groups that you work with, the people you work with?
I do see some. I don't see a whole lot. What I see mostly is addicts getting away with, when they're high or they're drunk or something like that, they get away with hurting the home, like punching a hole in the wall and not paying to get it fixed. And sometimes they push family members physically. They push somebody or hit somebody. And that is one of the main reasons that people enable, because they're afraid of the addict's anger.
Okay. Okay. So I know you're doing very well here. I know you're having a laryngitis problem. So
I have a little bit of laryngitis, everybody. Sorry about that.
Thanks for speaking as much as you
I'll
are.
suck on a lozenge.
Yeah, you suck on the lodge, and I'll talk for a second.
Okay.
So I saw in prison, those are the ones who became violent and assaulted their partners or their friends or whatever. They ended up in prison.
Right.
So that's where they go. That's where they end up. But this fear that's created within the family, that can be very manipulative, I would think.
It's very manipulative.
Hmm.
Addicts learn how to be manipulative. I remember being very manipulative in my addiction too. We want what we want when we want it. We want it right now,
Hmm.
and we'll do whatever we have to do to get it.
Right.
That needs to stop. That
Right.
needs to not be enabled.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. You got your job cut out for you.
I love it. I love it. It's so good to see the changes in a
Uh-huh.
family. It's just amazing to see that happen.
Okay, that's the great segue here. So tell me about when it starts to work and people start to get it and they start to implement what you're suggesting and you start to see changes. Tell me about that process.
Yeah, it's there are some families where that really happens. There are other families where the addict takes a long time to change, and the loved ones just need to take care of themselves while that's going on. But when there's change in a family, oh man, the relief, the bonding that happens,
Mm-hmm.
the welcome home,
Mm-hmm.
the handling things differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing. People actually get healthy and go on to live really good lives.
Excellent. Okay.
Phenomenal.
So I imagine that's what really keeps you doing what you're doing when you start to see those changes.
It is. I mean, I love seeing the changes. What really keeps me doing this is that I really do believe that we can stop addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I really do believe that.
So you believe that, and where is society with that belief?
There's a great book that somebody wrote about 25 years ago called When Society is Addicted, or When Society is an Addict. We have a very addictive society.
Mm-hmm.
We have commercials on TV that our children watch from the time they're one,
Mm-hmm.
talking about how we can't really love ourselves the way we are, so we have to use different deodorant, or we have to, we have to be different somehow,
Right.
and that just sets in motion a whole addictive process. And the political scene, especially now, is a whole addictive thing. CNN and all those places that are talking about all of this. It's a crazy thing. All of the drug commercials on TV, you've
Right.
seen those prescription drug commercials on TV
Yep.
that, are supposed to cure everything, but if you take them, they can kill you because they've got this side effect and that side effect. There's so many layers to how, we lament when people overdose. We've got evil people getting fentanyl on the street and doing
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And for some reason, whoever the powers that be are can't seem to find the people who are getting the fentanyl on the street, because somebody's getting rich from this. And it's all the bottom line. It's really all about money. Buy
Mm-hmm.
my product.
Right.
Don't feel good about yourself. Buy my product. Then you'll be better. It's crazy.
Right.
But the people who are the loved ones, the codependents, are watching these commercials too.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are not feeling good about themselves either.
Right.
And so when an addicted child tells a parent who doesn't feel good about themselves, I hate you, you're a terrible mother,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to do whatever they can to make that addict not say that.
Right. Right.
That needs to change.
Right. So what are some of the things that we, both as therapists, but as contributing members of society, what can we do to create a different zeitgeist out there to make addictions a thing of the past, as you wish and are working towards?
I think we need to really look at, we need to help clients look at where they feel like they're falling down, where they feel like they don't feel good about themselves.
Okay.
If we can get people past that point, get them to see why they feel that way and how that's really inaccurate. You know, the whole message in society is, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. And every single client that comes to a therapist feels that way. That's why they're coming. Something intrinsically wrong with me. Fix me.
Okay.
So if we can deal with a client's feeling of not being worthy or good enough, we've got it made.
Okay. Well, Candace, I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom and your experience. I've really enjoyed listening to what you have to say, for sure. And I don't know if people are able to link in or not here and put up some questions, if they've gone to the sites or not. So I'll just talk a little bit with you, and we'll see if any questions pop up or not. And if not, we've got another few minutes left before our hour is up, and we'll just take it from there. Yeah. So I'm just thinking of some of my clients that I've had, you know, that have had addictions issues, and it's always a challenge, for sure. And I've never really had the opportunity to work with the families. And what's the difference between, say, working with the addict and working with the family? What's the biggest difference you notice there? Or are they the same?
No, they're not the same at all. Usually, the addict is, I think I mentioned this a little bit, the addict, unless the addict is really at a place where they're wanting to change, they don't want to change. They don't want to change. They don't want to come see me. They don't want to come see a therapist, because what they don't want to do is stop using whatever the addiction is.
Right.
They're terrified. You know, addicts are very scared to give up their addiction. And we need to understand that about addicts. They're not just trying to be bad people. They're not bad people.
Well,
we are not bad people.
It's a coping mechanism.
It's a coping mechanism, and that's what they've used for a long, long time, most of them. So they're very scared to give that up. And when somebody starts to threaten that, when somebody makes that uncomfortable, you know, so usually the loved ones are the ones who are responsible. They got the money to pay for therapy. The addict doesn't. They're reliable. They're going to actually show up for appointments. Addicts often don't. If they're not going to show up, because a lot of them are such people pleasers, they're going to give you 2 weeks notice that they're not going to show up.
Right,
you know? And they're such wonderful people, you know. The addicts, I find the addicts fascinating because, I guess for me, because I'm an addict. You can't kid a kidder. I mean, like, I get you. I understand who you are. So I enjoy working with the addict when they show up and when they have the money to pay. Right? But the loved ones are so dear and so wanting desperately to have some kind of solution to this. So if there's anybody out there who is listening and may feel like they might want to work with the loved ones of addicts, please either contact me or, you know, find a way to get a little bit of training in this so that you can compassionately and wisely work with them. But we need you so much, and it's a hell of a niche. I'll tell you, I'm always full.
Okay.
It's a really good niche.
Could you tell us how they can get in contact with you?
Yes. My website is CandacePlattor.com, and should I spell it, or is it going to be on your website?
You can spell it.
Okay, so because if you don't spell it right, you won't get me.
Right.
So it's CANDACE PLATTOR.
TTOR. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
.com, and My email address is on there. I've got a contact form. You can email me. My phone number's on there. My book is on there. My blog, I've written lots and lots of articles about this. Just feel free to go and browse around.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Well, I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this time. There are some viewers on, but maybe they're shy. But they may have questions. Yeah, they may have questions ongoingly, and they can post them on the Facebook page, and I can always send them to you and get responses if you'd be willing to do that, if they come up with some questions. Yeah. That'd be great. Well, I think we'll end it right there then, Candace. It's been a real pleasure talking with you and engaging. I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to the next time that we have another chat.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye, all you taggers. Until next time, have a great day and a great night. Bye-bye.